So having that fundamental and mix of 2D work before going to 3D, that way you won't be, because with Sketch you're much more free to do. You're not limited by any technical aspects of 3D. Like if you want to change the pose, you can just draw it instead of figuring out, oh, how do I move this arm in 3D? How do I change the camera angle in 3D? So yeah, starting off with your own 2D sketch first before moving into 3D. So that way you can match your 3D with your sketch instead of the other way around.
It's pretty handy. Thank you for that. I'm sure the audience will appreciate that, especially those. I know some of the people here incorporate 3D in their workflow from the ones I hang out with in the lounge. So I hope that helps you guys. Now, I got a question for. Let's get intimate. Let's get down in 3D. So, were there any instances where you felt like the project brief might be too difficult or complicated for you to execute?
Yeah, a lot of times, especially when working on big scenes.
Mhm.
But how I navigate around that is
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our featured artist interview segment here at Brushpoint Academy. Our guest for tonight is yet again another hard hitter in the Philippine digital art scene. He graduated from Silliman University as a Bachelor of Science major in Mechanical Engineering. He has over 6 years of experience as a freelance illustrator, from Humble Squid Creative's Gunship Revolution and so on. And he is currently a 2D artist for Share Creators. If you're a local at Metal Pen server, chances are you've already seen him hanging around. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. JP Esmeralda. Let's start with something that probably caught the attention of the attendees, myself included. Your degree and your current art career. So can you walk us through that interesting path of yours? How did you start your art journey? And what led you to take a different career than what you studied?
so to start off with, as a kid, I like to draw a lot, as with most of us, I guess. And yeah, before I never really imagined, working as an artist, that for it to be my career. And then one of my interests at the time is engineering. So when I graduated high school, I had a choice of, chemical engineering or mechanical engineering. And one of the universities nearby offered Mech Eng. So I took it. And yeah, around, say, of first year or second year of college is where I really got into art. Yeah, I dedicated myself to learn it. And pushing through, eventually by the third year or fourth year of college, I was able to start taking in commissions. And yeah, I was able to pay for my tuition myself, have my family, and then that's when I decided, before I graduated, that and I will not be pursuing this anymore, since, to be honest, engineers in the Philippines are way, way too underpaid. And it's, yeah, just after graduating, I just decided to, let go of that dream, per se, and then just pursue art, since I was already working anyway. Yeah. So
Okay. What, was there any resistance from friends or family because of that choice?
actually, no, my family are very supportive of my art. My father likes to draw a lot, and my mother's like also a bit of an artist. So they understand that, yeah, and I was already making enough to show them that, this can be a viable career, a viable path. So they were
Okay.
very supportive.
How did you how did you hear about that as a career? Like how did you know you could make money off of art?
I guess social media, and I've already known around high school or college that the, concept artists can work in film, like book illustrators, stuff like that. So it was already in my radar. And yeah, I've heard of taking commissions for, portraits, stuff like that. And when I tried,
Okay, so did you first start off taking commissions online? Like, where did you find your commissioners? Where you get gigs when you started out?
I can't remember my first gig, but I think it was local. Um, I was just doing for fun, posting it, and then some. It was just portraits though, and some some people noticed it and wanted to paint like a portrait commission, and then eventually learned about Reddit. So yeah, Reddit r/ hungry artist art
Mm,
commissions. That's where I started.
okay, sweet. Okay, and then how did you get into metal pen?
Uh, I first noticed Metal Pen from Justin Cruz post, and by that at that time, I think I was in second year of college, and it was still what do you call that? Google Hangouts. Yeah, where it was very limited. I
Oh,
think only 10 or 12 people can join, and then I'd sometimes join, and it was. And what's worse of that is, I'm very shy, so I would join and then not speak at all, and so I'm like taking up a slot for those who actually want to join the conversation.
oh,
Yeah, and then eventually, by the time pandemic came, I think that the Discord was getting active, and I joined. Yeah, that's it.
okay. So a quick plug right here in case some of the listeners and future listeners might be curious. Metal Pen is another community for Filipino digital artists. They also have a Discord server, and that's actually where I started before Brushpoint. So again, Metal Pen is like another big community, and that's where I first saw Mr. JP Esmeralda. So let's talk about that actually. Since when I started last year in Metal Pen, you were one of the regulars that I saw, usually sharing their screen and working there. So I'm curious as to how often do you draw outside of your day job, and do you still have time for personal art?
Yeah, I make it a point to have a personal project ongoing, whether I work on it after my day job is, it's on a case to case basis, but I like to have something in the background and my work. And then what's nice about having a day job is compared to freelance is once you sign out, like there's no guilt of not working anymore compared to when you say you're in freelance and your time is yours to say. So when you work on personal projects, you feel that guilt, like, oh, I could be doing work for this. But for a day job, sign out is sign out. So I'm free to work. Um, yeah, outside of that, and I think I allot around 2 or 3 hours on some days to work on personal projects, and some days I just don't, depending on the workload of that week. So yeah.
Okay. You probably meet more younger artists now in the Metal Pen server. You've been there for quite a while. So I'm very curious as well as to what are some of the things beginner artists frequently ask you.
Mm, not sure if it's frequent, but depending on, for example, when I share my screen, I get asked about my process. We have an ongoing joke of, two. If someone will ask if it's 2D plus 3D, something like that. Yeah, mostly about my process and yeah, something like stuff like that.
Okay, but I guess something common aside from your workflow. We'll get into your workflow later on. But are there any um, recurring question that they ask about the community, how do they start out, or some pet peeves, some questions that trigger you from beginner artists?
What Rushdie is. Sorry, no. Yeah, something like that. And
What,
it's not a pet
what
peeve,
brush do
but
you use?
one question I see a lot from artists starting out is like how you get commissions. Yeah, not to me, like, asked to me in general, but asked in the community, like how you get commissions, how to get clients, stuff like that.
Okay. I guess this can be one of the questions they probably ask, but if not, I'll be the first to ask. Before you start any project, what are the preparations that you do when tackling illustrations? For example, do you do studies beforehand? Or do you have a big board of references? Is there any ritual, or do you have a mindset that you always think go back to before doing a big complicated illustration?
The big board of references really helps, so I start with that. Then yeah, just a reference of what's possible with the project. Can we do this kind of stuff? Can we do this style? Um, read the art brief very carefully. Ask any questions from the art directors. What's the focus of this? What's the purpose of this art? Is this going to be shown here? Um, yeah, that and the references can really help in starting a project.
Walk us through virtually when you get something that you're not familiar with, let's say something sci-fi or something you haven't exactly done yet. How would you prepare your references for something outside of your comfort zone? How would you prepare for that?
So I'd base it off on the art brief first. Usually they have color references or style references, and then depending on the world, I can easily search for the word on the reference. For example, they want something similar to Star Wars, for example. Then I search for references based on that, and depending on other stuff, for like example, they want the style of this artist, so I look online to search that artist even further and how they work and their similar pieces. Yeah.
Okay. Now I've heard that your illustration workflow now includes 3D to help in efficiency. If I'm not mistaken, you got started adapting that in your workflow from a CGMA course. So could you talk about that course exactly? That CG Master Academy course that you took.
Yeah.
And what was the value that you got from enrolling in it?
Yeah, I was transitioning from 2D and then learning Blender at very basic level. And I saw this course from Ricardo Limas, like my instructor there. And
Hmm.
his art and workflow seemed interesting to me. And that's what I see other people are doing also. So I need to adapt, need to learn this. And yeah, 3D has been I've already been familiar with 3D a bit for because of my engineering course from CAD. So that transition was basically to learn the program and the workflow of how I could apply it to my illustration, and watching the instructor's work, Ricardo Lima. His workflow seemed interesting to me, and I took that course. And yeah, it was really great. That was it opened up my eyes to the possibilities of combining workflows.
Could you talk more about that instructor, Ricardo, right? Were
Yeah.
you a fan of his before? Like before you saw the course? And did you take the course because you were a fan? Or you were just browsing through the list of courses and you saw the instructor, then you checked them out and you're like, I want to learn from you.
Yeah, I was just browsing through the course because I've already had set in mind that I want to learn 3D, and I was looking at possible courses. There's also the Brainstorm website that I looked into, but for CGMA, what pulled me in is because there are pre-recorded. It's a mix of pre-recorded lessons and live feedback, as opposed to Brainstorm, in which all are live. And no, it's much more flexible for to have something pre-recorded because I can learn in my own pace. And yeah,
Okay. Okay. Quick side note, everyone. So, for those of you that might not know, CG Master Academy, or CGMA for short, is a website for online courses. So, I only found out about this last year, honestly. So, if you're like me and you were ignorant, you can check that out. There are also other websites where you can enroll, like under Paint Academy. So subtle plug right there. We're not sponsored in any way. So baka naman, CGMA. All right, going back. Enrolling in those online courses, such as CGMA, can be quite expensive for us Filipinos. So the average course in CGMA runs around 699 USD. So that's roughly 40,000 pesos right now if our economy doesn't suffer. So, and as such, only a few can afford those courses. So let's say you didn't take that course. For example, if you didn't take that course, what would be different with the JP Esmeralda now?
I wouldn't think that there'd be much any difference since there are tons of YouTube tutorials that are very extensive and some would even be better than courses. What I liked about courses is they create this structure that you can follow, and there's also live feedback. But if I didn't have access to that, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it will be much different since I probably learn through YouTube and other free resources out there, which I'm still continuing to do. I still search a lot of YouTube tutorials, and in the internet there's tons of free resources that you don't have to pay for anything, and yeah, some are even better than the courses. So you don't get discouraged like I can't pay for this course. I'll not learn this. It's too expensive. I'm not gonna.
Okay, hear that, folks. Okay, again, it's just a tool, but it's not the end all be all. If you can't enroll, it gives you a bit of an edge because someone can provide feedback. You have an instructor that's focused on your progress, but it's not the end of the world if you can't enroll. So a quick little PSA for that. Now, since you use 3D in your workflow, I was listening to the interview of Brushpoint before, and I think Metal Pen also interviewed Kabuki Cat, I think, yeah, Gen C, um, on using the fundamentals. And 3D can help you in your efficiency, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty guilty of this myself. Some of the young artists use photo bashing or 3D as a crutch. I'm guilty. Again, once again, I was guilty of that. I'm starting out. But my question for you is, how do you prevent the usage of 3D in your workflow from becoming a crutch? What is the mindset that you adopt when using 3D or photo bashing techniques? How do you not become a slave to your to the 3D assets that you have?
So I start off with 2D first, usually, or depending on the project, before going into 3D. So it sometimes have a sketch ready or an idea ready. Because sometimes I see other artists uh, work in 3D and then they limit themselves to what they can do in that. So
Mm.
yeah, some people would just do in 3D and then what angle or what pose they can do there, they'll just copy it instead of pushing it further into 2D. So having that fundamental and mix of 2D work before going to 3D, that way you won't be, because with Sketch you're much more free to do. You're not limited by any technical aspects of 3D. Like if you want to change the pose, you can just draw it instead of figuring out, oh, how do I move this arm in 3D? How do I change the camera angle in 3D? So yeah, starting off with your own 2D sketch first before moving into 3D. So that way you can match your 3D with your sketch instead of the other way around.
It's pretty handy. Thank you for that. I'm sure the audience will appreciate that, especially those. I know some of the people here incorporate 3D in their workflow from the ones I hang out with in the lounge. So I hope that helps you guys. Now, I got a question for. Let's get intimate. Let's get down in 3D. So, were there any instances where you felt like the project brief might be too difficult or complicated for you to execute?
Yeah, a lot of times, especially when working on big scenes.
Mhm.
But how I navigate around that is I break down the project into little pieces first, to bite-sized pieces. So, say, the brief gets very overwhelming. Start off with what I can do for the day. Like, start off with references first, and just don't think about the rendering, don't think about the composition until later on. That way, I can focus on this part. Then sometimes we get the references approved depending on the work, and yeah, now that you're limited into that, you can just forget the references. I mean, not forget, but set it aside. Then you can move on to the sketch phase and then just focus on that. Don't think about the color, don't think about the rendering. Just focus on the sketch and then your references beside you. And then we'll build those up over time. So yeah, bite size will bite little bit, a little bit. So yeah, stage by stage. That way it won't be too overwhelming. Say yeah.
Okay. What was the most memorable feedback that you got on the top of your mind? Something that
There are
stuck with you all this time.
feedbacks from my work are pretty harsh. I'll be showing some sample feedback later, but yeah, they don't hold back for feedback and work. So they sometimes say that, oh, this doesn't look good. This is very messy. Uh, stuff like that. You can separate your work from yourself. Like, for example, they say that this doesn't look good at all. You can just say, okay, it's just for that work. It's not for Lisa. Yeah, but there are tons of feedback. Like, there's also tons of feedback that are very, extensive and difficult. Like, for example, we joke about it a lot, but feedbacks that say that, can you change this angle? Can we change the camera angle to this? It sounds like a joke, but yeah,
Mhm.
it happens a lot. And they're very time consuming to say, to adjust.
Okay. Hmm. I guess we can rephrase it. What was the most valuable feedback that you
Oh,
got?
uh, there was a point in my work that most feedback I get is to increase the ambient lighting for my piece, because I've looked back at this and I was looking back and yeah, my shadows look too muddy and too dark. And then most of the feedback I get is, can you increase the bluish ambient lighting on this? And that really stuck with me because I saw that I tend to do it a lot. And now, just keep that in mind whenever I. But yeah, depending, there are times where feedbacks would stick with me, and then that's how you learn. That's why it's better to have an art director to check your work and clients to check your work, because the feedbacks they give, though maybe harsh, they're really constructive and they push the piece further, as opposed to they don't say just I don't like this and that's it. They say I don't like this because something like this. This can be better to do this. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in the metal pen community, there is a great culture of peer evaluation or peer critiques, feedback. Was there any memorable artist? You don't have to name the artist, but you can talk about the feedback that you gave. Did anyone ask you for feedback, and what was the most memorable one you gave?
Hmm. Trying to think. Uh, hmm. I don't tend to give tons of feedback on Metal Pen because I know that there are artists better than me that can provide those feedback. Not really sure if I can remember any specific feedback that they gave. No, I'm not sure I can.
Okay, we can rephrase it, or we can work it around. Since you're usually hanging out there and uh you can hear other people give feedback. What was one feedback that stuck with you, even though it wasn't for you, but it was so valuable, and you could pick up a lot of value from it, that it stuck with you?
Mm.
Again, you don't have to name names.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. um, One feedback that I think is the most valuable and gets repeated a lot is, look for references. That's
Mm,
something that gets repeated, every
spicy.
time asked for critique. Yeah, that's something that everyone can relate to and take into account.
Okay. Regardless of what your level is, you're gonna
Yeah.
need the reference always. Safe answer, says Red. Okay. Oh, okay. We're nearing the end. So we're nearing our Q&A portion slash showcase. JP will be showcasing a bit of his workflow. So for you guys there, you can prepare your questions and I can read them out. If you can't frame your question in English, don't worry. You can type it in Filipino. I'll translate on the spot. So let's go to my final question. Let's get pretty intimate. Are there any moments wherein you feel stuck with your art or career? What keeps you going whenever those times come?
Yeah, every month I feel that there's this wave of the highs and lows of, well, especially when starting a piece or towards the end of the piece, where like, oh, really proud of this art, and I can't wait to show it. I'm really proud of this, and then once it's done, once it's posted, they'll be like, oh, it looks so bad. Uh, there are times like, especially since I compare myself a lot to artists on that I see on our station, or the artists that I look up to. There are times like that. No, I feel bad because like they're so good. I'll never be able to reach this. And I also look back for on my work, like these months I just did these artworks, and they did not improve a lot. Yeah, I can say that as I'm way too harsh on myself, since I think about those a lot, especially in work. There are times where the imposter syndrome kicks in, and yeah, you feel that sometimes that not doing good enough, and yeah, it's being way too harsh on myself, which is something I need to learn to improve on.
How do you? I mean, you mentioned that you need to improve on it, and as artists, again, it's not validating because I noticed this with other artists as well, myself included, where we tend to be hard on ourselves whenever we see other people excelling, right? So, what helps you keep up with that? Is there any advice that you got from other people that helped you whenever those thoughts came?
Yeah, it's just taking a step back and taking a break from art. Just this past month, I didn't even work on any personal projects. I took up other things like started to learn in gouache or get back
Mm,
into photography, something like that. That way, when you come back to your art, um, you're met with a fresh eye on your work, and you can assess further where you need to improve. And also, like to buy tutorials and enroll classes. It's something that helps me not feel stagnant. Um, yeah, I see it as a way for investing in myself. Yeah, instead of just figuring stuff out on my own and just buy tutorials and then learn from these other artists and then apply it to my work. That way, even if it's just a little bit of progress, there's still that feeling of leveling up.
that's a great answer, and it's a great ender for this interview segment. So, wow, thank you, Mr. JP Esmeralda.